Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Want to make sure you all tap in. I believe that we're going to have a great show this evening. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and the like button. Just pound that like button into submission. We're going to be talking about the NAACP. We're talking about the National Association for Colored People, the Advancement of Colored People, created, if I remember correctly, in 1909. They have asked Black student athletes, prospective Black collegiate student athletes, to reconsider attending Florida public colleges and universities, particularly universities such as Florida State and, of course, the University of Florida. We're not going to include the University of Miami. Shout out to the U, because they are a private institution of higher education. So we're not going to be discussing the University of Miami, even though I got love for the U. But we're going to, of course, be focusing on the University of Florida and Florida State. So the link is in the description, family. The link is in the description. Also, if you are unaware, this is a dual stream between, of course, Lumumba Speaks and the Bequaline Network. So want to make sure that we're always betting on Black here at Lumumba Speaks. And then, of course, last but not least, we want to make sure that when we're having this conversation, that there's some certain do's and don'ts that we like to go over, right? Number one, we want to make sure that diversity of thought is welcome, right? So irrespective if you're on the right, if you're on the left, or you're right down the middle, ideologically, that is quite all right. We still want to hear your voice and hear what you have to say. Number two, and more importantly, no racial epithets are allowed on the platform during the conversation at any time. So no racial epithets, no epithets at all are allowed. We believe in this being a space of Black power, right? When we talk about the three N's of Black power, those three N's are, of course, self-respect, self-defense, and then, of course, last but not least, self-determination. So we want to make sure that we're living, that we're moving, and that we're practicing those ends of Black power. Moving forward, number three, facts over feelings. So when we're having this conversation, we want to make sure that you attack the argument the person is making rather than the person themselves, right? We don't want to engage in ad hominems, right? Then, of course, number four, no fundamentally false statements. You are entitled to your opinion, but we do not want to engage in fundamentally false statements. For example, you can believe, right, wrong, or indifferent, that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player who ever lived, that laced up a pair of sneakers, right, that ever touched the hardwood, right? However, if you were to state that LeBron James was the best player ever because Michael Jordan only won 2 championships, that would be an example of a fundamentally false statement. I want to say timeout. I'm gonna pull out I'm gonna yank you out of there like they do at the Apollo, and then we're gonna, of course, correct that misnomer before we continue with our conversation. Then, last but not least, our mission here is not to exonerate or vilify, but simply to challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. So, with that being said, we got all of that out the way. We're going to make sure that we're squared away here. And we're going to have this conversation regarding the NAACP asking Black student athletes to reconsider Florida colleges. If you're watching, put a 1 in the chat if you are familiar with this story. Put a 2 in the chat if you're unfamiliar. And then I will also want to hear you all's thoughts regarding what are your thoughts of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I would love to hear what you all think of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, right? So we're going to have this great conversation this evening regarding the NAACP ask Black student athletes to reconsider Florida colleges, get you all's thoughts on that. And then, of course, we're going to move forward and make sure that we have a conversation this evening, not only regarding this issue, this ask of the NAACP, but also what are you all's thoughts of the NAACP as well? As we know, it's a multiracial organization. Malcolm X was known for his criticism, his critique of the NAACP. And we also know that, unfortunately, we tend to find an issue in which the NAACP has practiced a form of anti-Blackness, even in the organization for several years, decades. There was never a Black president of the NAACP. Many people take issue with that. Even W. Du Bois, on his time, when he created Crisis Magazine, which is the literary organ of the NAACP, he was even fostered in the work he was doing there. So we'll have that conversation. I'm going to put the link in the chat, family. I'm going to put the link in the chat, and then I'm going to move forward and read the article that I read on ESPN.com, and then we're going to get the conversation started. So the link is in the chat. The link is also in the description. So let me bring this up here. Okay. So the NAACP asked Black student athletes to reconsider their decisions to attend public colleges and universities in the state of Florida in response to the University of Florida and other state schools recently eliminating their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And a letter sent to NAACP President Charlie Baker and addressed to current and prospective student athletes Monday. NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson wrote, "This is not about politics. It's about the protection of our community, the progression of our culture, and most of all, it's about your education and your future." Last year, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill that prohibits the use of state funds for any DEI programs. As a result, the University of Florida announced on March 1st it had closed the office of the Chief Diversity Officer, eliminated 13 full-time DEI positions and 15 administrative appointments, and halted DEI-focused contracts with outside vendors. Other in-state schools, such as North Florida and Florida International, have also recently shuttered DEI programs. NFL Hall of Famer and Florida great Emmitt Smith also spoke out, voicing his disgust at University of Florida's decision and asking minority athletes at University of Florida to be aware and vocal about the decision. In a statement, Johnson said diversity, equity, and inclusion are paramount to ensuring equitable and effective educational outcomes. The value Black and other college athletes bring to large universities is unmatched. If these institutions are unable to completely invest in those athletes, it's time they take their talents elsewhere. So there you have it, family. There's the article there on ESPN regarding the NAACP advocating for Black student athletes to reconsider attending public institutions such as Florida State and Florida University. Even Emmitt Smith, the NFL Hall of Famer, many of you may be unaware, but Emmitt Smith is an NFL Hall of Famer, 3-time Super Bowl champion, league MVP, and of course, he's the NFL's all-time leading rusher. We also know that Emmitt Smith was a former All-American, and he was an All-American at the University of Florida. He even spoke out, taking umbrage with the decision. And many of you may be unaware of what took place and why this came to be. So the Governor Ron DeSantis, let me see if I can pull this up very quickly, family. DeSantis. So he argues that diversity, equity, inclusion actually means discrimination, inclusion, and indoctrination, right? So definitely want you all to tap in. We can have a conversation about your thoughts of DEI programs. DeSantis, who's the current governor of Florida, argues that DEI stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination rather than diversity, equity, and inclusion. So definitely would love to hear what you all have to say about that. And then, of course, last but not least, we want you all to make sure that you tap in and give your thoughts about the NAACP as an organization. And then, of course, your thoughts regarding the NAACP's ask of Black student athletes to reconsider Florida colleges, right? So we're talking about the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Want you all to tap in. The link is in the chat. The link is also in the description. If you're watching, make sure you subscribe and hit the thumbs up button. Want you all to tap in and share with us your thoughts, once again, on the NAACP. Many people may be unaware, Ron DeSantis, who's the current governor of Florida, has really been on a warpath regarding DEI initiatives, not only in higher education, but even in secondary education. And so it's come to a tipping point, right? And as a result, they've eliminated numerous positions statewide. Some of this includes, I may not be aware, but may even include the removal of Black cultural centers, right, from institutions of higher education. So we're talking about now the economic issues, people losing their jobs, even in terms of contracts. Oftentimes, if you have a Black culture center, when they have culture programming, they would actually have contracts with different Black vendors, right, food vendors, etc. So now that's been removed as well. So there's even a financial toll that's taking place. And so this is something I think we should unpack, particularly when we talk about some of these issues regarding left wing and right wing politics, right? So definitely want you all to tap in. You're watching Lumumba Speaks and Bitcoin Line Network here on YouTube. As you know, Lumumba Speaks, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And so we want to cover three things. One, I want to get you all's views on Ron DeSantis, right? And of course, we want to have an intellectual conversation regarding that. Number two, I want to get your thoughts on the on the NAACP as an organization. And then, of course, number 3, want to get your thoughts on, of course, the NAACP's ask, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, their ask regarding Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida institutions, as I stated before. The NFL Hall of Famer, former MVP, 3-time Super Bowl champion, and the NFL's all-time leading rusher, and All-American at the University of Florida, Emmitt Smith. He's even stated that he takes umbrage with this decision to remove DEI institutions. And so he's even asking student athletes, prospective collegiate student athletes, and even current student athletes to reconsider attending Florida institutions. So something to consider here. But as I said before, the link is in the chat. The link is also in the description. And if you're watching on Twitter, I would love if you could all tap in. I put the link in the chat. If you want to go to YouTube and look us up here at Lumumba Speaks or Beacon Network, we can have you all tap in. But I'm gonna see if I can, if possible, put the link in the chat for Twitter. Let me see if I can do that, and maybe that could help some people tap in and we can be part of this conversation. No, I don't think I could do that. Okay, because I definitely want to hear what you all have to say, because this is the issue that affects us all. It's an issue that affects us all. So I think it's important that we unpack this and what would be the move that we make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link on Twitter in the comments. So if you all are watching on Twitter, you want to tap in, be part of the conversation, you will be able to do that. Once again, the link is now on Twitter in the comments. If you want to tap in and be part of the conversation regarding the NAACP making a major ask, and that ask is asking Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida colleges, right? So we're talking about particularly University of Florida and Florida State University. Go Seminoles, go Gators, right? And of course, we're not going to discuss University of Miami because they are a private institution, so they don't receive state funds to operate. And so as a result, we're not going to touch base on the U, right? But 3 things I want to cover is, of course, your thoughts on NAACP as an organization. Some people argue that they're reactionary. Of course, we know many argue that they're a member of the bourgeoisie class of Black leaders. And they were, of course, as an integrationist organization. Started off as an interracial organization. Then, of course, your thoughts on Governor Ron DeSantis and your views on DEI and higher education as well. So I think we have a lot that we can unpack this evening regarding this issue. And so definitely looking for you all to tap in. Once again, you do not have to cam up to be part of this conversation. Just want to make that clear. You do not have to cam up. You don't have to turn your camera on. Also, you do not you don't have to use your real name as well. So you could use a pseudonym. You know, oftentimes people may say, hey, I have a public facing job, or I might make some comments that may be disconcerting to some. I don't want this to affect my employment. Completely understand that. And so this is an opportunity for you all to say, hey, you know what, I want to express my views, give my perspective, but I don't want to do so in a manner that may be detrimental to my livelihood and my existence, right? So that way you could cam up, you could use a pseudonym and be part of the conversation. And I think that there's a lot that needs to be covered, a lot that needs to be unpacked here. And so I'm thinking that this would be a great opportunity. My thoughts is that I think this is a major issue, right? I would take issue, I have trepidation, I guess you could say, in terms of having student athletes, teenagers, typically teenagers, 17, 18, 19 years old, just going out into the adult world, right? And now you're asking them to make a major decision. I think that could be an issue. That is a cause for concern. Many would argue that these universities, and of course, these are arguments that are even made in a lot of literature. A good book here is Racism in College Athletics, 3rd edition. Great book, great read if you want to. It talks about racism and collegiate athletics. So we know that Black student athletes face a number of issues on campus, right? I've read a lot of academic literature regarding this. Even William C. wrote in his seminal text, $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the African-American Athlete. He even discusses this. He talks about this very issue as well. So something to consider. I don't know. There we go. We can kind of bring it back to light. It's causing some issues there in terms of being able to see the book. So that's an issue. And typically with the students, they have able to have a reprieve from the isolating nature of anti-Blackness due to having these DEI initiatives, Black culture centers, a space to call home, so on and so forth, a place where they could be themselves. So that takes away from that. This is another issue that we bring up in terms of the culture wars that we find not only in higher education, but also in politics as well, right? If you are unaware, I think everybody should get a hold of Charles Mills. Shout out to the Jamaican brother. His book, The Racial Contract, I think is an eye opener. It's the basis of my dissertation, right? I do some work in terms of unpacking the cultural contract, but I do think this is something to consider. So if you all want to be part of the conversation, make sure you tap in. The link is in the chat. The link is in the description. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell. Make sure you're killing it. Pound that thumbs up as well. Definitely want to have a great conversation this evening regarding the NAACP and their ask, a major ask regarding asking Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida colleges and universities, particularly University of Florida, and of course Florida State, but even lesser institutions such as athletically lesser institutions such as University of South Florida. They would take umbrage with that, in the University of Central Florida, right? Those are some prospective football schools as well. I know the University of Central Florida, UCF, I believe they even were self-proclaimed national champions. I think they beat a SEC team in a bowl game, went undefeated that year, and so they claim that they even won a natty as well. So I definitely don't want to leave them out. No shade to UCF and University of Central Florida. In fact, I think they have an I-4 rivalry in football, so in basketball. So definitely a major issue. Shout out to all the brothers and sisters in the Sunshine State. But once again, family, I want you all to tap in. Let's have a great conversation this evening regarding the NAACP's ask of Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida colleges and universities. Also want to get your thoughts, as I stated before, on the NAACP as an organization, and DEI initiatives in higher ed, and of course the Governor Ron DeSantis, right? There's a number of individuals. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday. I went to the gym just and walking on the treadmill because I can't wait to start physical therapy so I can get back in it. And the brother was asking me about, hey, we're always voting Democrat. We haven't got anything out of this in the past 60 years. I think about voting Republican. I said, well, you got a right to do whatever you want. But I said, something you need to understand is that America's policy towards African people, foreign and domestic, is the same. Anti-Blackness. So I said, this is something that you need to be cognizant of. And actually directed him to an article that I wrote on Medium. And if you aren't aware, I'm going to put the link to my Medium account. And I would love for you all to follow me on Medium. I write a number of timely articles on Medium, and definitely will look forward to getting you all's feedback. So the link to my Medium account now is in the chat. But I definitely would love to hear what you all have to say regarding this issue. But back, like I was saying, had a conversation with the brother, and I said, you need to be cognizant and aware that irrespective of what political party you are voting for, the policy is the same. And so I'm a huge advocate of making addressing that one should vote for the policy rather than the party, right? You need to focus on policy rather than party. So matter of fact, let me bring up this article that I wrote on the American policies and how it really works, right? So this is an article I wrote on Medium, family. So we talk about, in the book, American Society, How It Really Works. Two authors, Earl Wright and Joel Rogers, take aim at the myths of American society, in particular politics. For instance, they opine that the same special interest groups fund both major political parties, Republican and Democrat, and typically, aside from semantical issues, agree on major domestic and foreign policy concerns. For example, both parties in their respective presidential administrations supported apartheid in South Africa, the end of Reconstruction, the counterintelligence program against civil rights organizations, foreign aid to Israel, and Operation Iraqi Freedom, to name a few, right? So I think this is something that we need to be cognizant of, right? And one of the major issues I think we find in African-American politics, this is something that Dr. Kendra King talked about in her book, African-American Politics, is that Black voters vote for symbolism, the candidate that looks and can identify with potential constituents rather than substance, a candidate that delivers tangible benefits to their constituents. And so I think when we talk about the political game, we don't find either political party on either side of the aisle actually providing tangibles, right, for the Black community. I know there's a lot of people in the Twitter sphere, Twitter space, and on YouTube that make the argument that Trump, of course, has promised a lot. And they give an example of opportunity zones, something that he did for the Black community. But what we find is the opportunity zones simply provided tax breaks for developers, right? So that wasn't an actual benefit for the Black community. Others would argue that he signed the First Step Act. Many people are unaware that that was something that was initiated by Congress during the tail end of the Obama administration. And so it already went through, and then, of course, Trump approved it. But people say, well, that's a benefit for the Black community. I would argue no. I said, if people are engaging in criminal activity, these people aren't friends of mine. And then we also have to understand that I'm not a criminal, so it's no benefit to me. So something to be cognizant of when we talk about some of these issues, really getting into the weeds and knowing that the devil is in the details. So with that said, family, I don't want to go on all evening, but definitely want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation, and get your thoughts on this issue. The link is in the chat. The link is in the description. And on Twitter, I put the link in the comments. So if you're watching on Twitter, I see that we have some Twitter viewers. The link is in the comment if you want to tap in and be part of the conversation. Once again, you do not have to cam up. You do not have to cam up, and you can, keyword can, use a pseudonym. So if you want to maintain your anonymity, if you do not want anyone to know who you are, I have no problem with that. You could still tap in and be part of the conversation regarding the NAACP's ask of Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida colleges, public institutions, particularly University of Florida, Florida State, University of South Florida, and of course, University of Central Florida. And if I remember correctly, I think UCF, University of Central Florida, is now the largest institution of higher education in America. I think they had the largest number of student body enrollment. I know historically it had always been Arizona State, Texas, University of Texas, Austin, and then of course the Ohio State University. Shout out to Ohio State, the Buckeyes. We're always handling our business, and we're gonna win that natty this year. 24. You heard it here, folks, at the Movement Speaks. The Ohio State University will win the national championship in the 2024 college football season. You heard it here first on Lumumba Speaks. But once again, family, I want to hear what you all have to say. Put a 1 in the chat if you are aware of this issue, aware of this story with the NAACP making his ass. Put a 2 in the chat if you were unaware. So once again, if you were aware of this issue, put a 1 in the chat. And if you were unaware, put a 2 in the chat regarding the story of the NAACP making a major monumental ask of prospective and even current Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida colleges and universities. As we all know, Black student athletes oftentimes are the primary labor source in terms of the revenue that these institutions generate. However, because of NIL, these students now, at the very least, are being paid for their labor, right? So we definitely are grateful and thankful for that. However, I do think there's a cause for concern with this issue, the isolating nature of anti-Blackness that we find on campus, that the students don't have anywhere to turn for cultural programming, so on and so forth, that it could be it's a major issue. So I definitely want to tap into that. I know this is a bit in the higher ed world, they call it ivory tower, but I think it's an issue that affects us all, particularly in terms of young men and young women who are prospective college athletes. We oftentimes push our children, our hope holistically, right, to achieve any endeavor that they engage in. But we do know for a large number of our people, they do go to college, and that we hope that they are able to develop part of going to college is the concept of developing as a complete human being, as a holistic human being. So those are my thoughts on the issue. I want you all to tap in as well. Once again, to share your thoughts on Governor DeSantis, who I believe still in his first term of governorship in Florida. And then, of course, want you all to share your thoughts on the NAACP as well, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. If I remember correctly, this organization was created in 1909. If I'm wrong, please fact check me, because I'm just going off of memory. I haven't actually looked this up. It's been quite some time since I've actually read or done any research or even talked about the NAACP. So we could, of course, have a conversation regarding the NAACP as an organization, their leadership model, how they seek to address issues in the Black community. I know I've had my experiences with the NAACP. I always argue that the NAACP typically, from my perspective, is a first wave organization, right? So typically when you're someone who becomes politically engaged, knowledgeable, when you want to join an organization, many people start off with the NAACP as one of the old guard civil rights organizations. As I said, they've been around for, I believe, 115 years. And so people tend to get there, become disenchanted with the politics of the NAACP and even the ideology of the NAACP, and then they go elsewhere. That's why I call it first wave. But I will say, in my experience, the NAACP and and higher education tends to be much more radical than the NAACP, of course, in civil society. Also, very quickly, 15 years ago, I had attended a NAACP Freedom Fund dinner, and I was shocked that the keynote speaker was the vice president of some malt liquor company, right? And so was able to become knowledgeable of the fact that and the NAACP gets a lot of their funding from, of course, they have corporate partners. And so we know whoever feeds you imposes their will upon you. And then the second issue that was extremely disconcerting for me was three issues. The second issue was at the benefit banquet, all of the uh, waiters and waitresses were wearing African attire. So almost like, they were serving us, and so they were being African while serving us. It was disconcerting for me. Then number three, I know this was an issue that took place many years ago where there was a Black woman who talked about how, her father was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. And the murder was covered up by white supremacists on the police force and civil society and in these administrative positions, judges, etc. So she said that she had a severe hatred for white people at the time. But she stated that through her love for Jesus, she was able to no longer hate white people. She made this comment, and the NAACP actually fired her from her position, right? So we tend to find that these are some of the issues that the NAACP engages in terms of why people view the NAACP in a problematic manner. But then, of course, last but not least, family, if you are a prospective student athlete, or you have a child that is a prospective student athlete, would you want them to attend college in Florida? So those are the questions I'm posing for the family. Please tap in. Once again, we've been going for almost 30 minutes. Tap in. You do not have to use your real name. You can use a pseudonym, and you don't have to cam up to be part of the conversation. But once again, put a 1 in the chat if you are aware of this issue in terms of the NAACP's ask, and put a 2 in the chat if you were unaware of this issue. I think this is something that we do need to discuss as a community regarding, should we have our young men and women playing ball in the state of Florida, considering the governor's stances, right? This is a man who's eliminated, once again, as I stated, numerous positions, DEI positions. And of course, I want to get your all's thoughts on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and higher ed. As we know, DeSantis calls DEI discrimination, inclusion, and indoctrination. So let me read this article, and hopefully, many of you can tap in and be part of the conversation. So DeSantis bans DEI in Florida, calling it discrimination, inclusion, and indoctrination. SB 266 precludes public colleges and universities from teaching required general courses that insinuate systemic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege are inherent in the institutions of the United States. As the spring semester ends, administration across Florida's public colleges and universities will have to work quickly to descale the most programs or resources related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On Monday, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a spate of bills, the most important one prohibiting Florida's public institutions from spending money on DEI initiatives, according to a press release. Referring to DEI as a concept that promotes dangerous political and social activism, DeSantis believes it espouses censorship and disproportionately antagonizes conservative voices on campus. When the governor helped revamp New College in Florida as a classical and conservative-leaning institution in January, the school swiftly eliminated its Office of Outreach and Inclusive Excellence. If you look at the way this has actually been implemented across the country, DEI is better viewed as standing for discrimination, inclusion, and indoctrination, DeSantis said at a news conference, and that has no place in our public institutions. This bill says the whole experiment with DEI is coming to an end in the state of Florida. SB 266 also precludes public colleges and universities from teaching required general courses that insinuate systemic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege are inherent in institutions of the United States, and that they are weaponized to sustain inequities across the country's social, political, and economic environment. Moreover, the bill places higher accountability on university presidents to fire faculty. So we're talking about the elimination of tenure here, right? Another bill signed into law that they prohibit state institutions from requiring faculty or students to sign DEI statements. It also requires schools to establish an Office of Public Policy events to ensure speakers' events host a range of divergent opinions on public policy. Some believe that initiatives by Florida's politicians to limit DEI efforts constrain institutions' academic freedom. I would agree. It basically state mandated censorship, which has no place in a democracy. Irene Mulvey, president of the American Association of University Professors, according to the Washington Post. The census flagship Stop Woke Act bill in November aimed to clamp down on reviewing tenured faculty members who teach divisive concepts. However, a U.S. district judge struck down many critical aspects of the bill as he compared it to George Orwell's famous book in 1984. Efforts targeting DEI grow nationwide. So there's something to be cognizant of regarding these issues in higher education. Typically, when we talk, people think of DEI, they don't think of course, in the classroom, right? And so in the classroom, this is a major issue because if they're saying, hey, you can't teach about issues of systemic racism, then you can't teach African American history, right? You can't have Black studies, right? So that those majors will be removed, those classes will be removed. So definitely something to consider when we talk about, in my opinion, why DEI is something that we should support, right? Because as you can see, it's almost all encompassing, and he took issue with censorship, but then he, of course, he's seeking to do the same thing. So just something to consider, family. I want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation. I'm not really gonna close things out, but I do think this would be a great conversation for us to have. So I'm gonna keep it going just a little bit longer. But once again, the link is in the chat, family. The link is in the description. Once again, if you are familiar with this story, put a 1 in the chat. And if you're unfamiliar, put a 2 in the chat. If you're familiar with the NAACP's ask of Black student athletes, put a 1 in the chat. If you're unfamiliar, put a 2 in the chat. Definitely want to hear back from you all regarding this issue in higher education. So make sure you tap in, family. Want to hear what you all have to say regarding this issue of the NAACP asking Black student athletes to reconsider attending Florida colleges and universities. So got a 1 from someone that's stating that they were aware. So once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation this evening. I know it's a Saturday night, and I know the mood is probably right? But tap in, be part of the conversation. I definitely want to hear from you all this evening as we have this great, so you can have a great conversation. And of course, we could tap in and discuss the NAACP as an organization, of course, Governor Ron DeSantis, his administration, and then, of course, this issue of DEI in higher education and Black student athletes. So definitely looking forward to hear from you all this evening. If not, I guess we're going to call it a night. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Peace.